What are trusts anyway, and aren't they just for the uber rich? Hi, I'm Brandon Ayers, and I'm an estate planning attorney, but I'm not your attorney. Let's talk about trusts. First thing you should know, the trusts are not just for the uber rich. Almost everybody can get value out of a trust. The best analogy to look at when you're thinking about which trust is right for me is really think of ice cream and how many flavors of ice cream out there. There are many people who say that there are as many trusts as there are flavors of ice cream. And we're gonna break that down a little bit, but first I wanna get some base level vocabulary set, so let's go to the big board. Okay, so before we get into trusts, it's really important that we go over some key vocabulary. Trusts are such a highly technical part of estate planning that it's really important that we have this base knowledge before we proceed. And speaking of before we proceed, it's important for you to understand this is not legal advice. I don't know who you are. I'm looking at a camera right now, not your face. So this is not legal advice. This is meant for informational purposes. You should find your own attorney, me, somebody you trust, to give you your specific legal advice for your specific situation. So let's start up here with the grantor, settlor, or trust maker. In my world, those are all essentially synonyms, and they're all the people who decide on the rules. These are my clients. These are the ones who, after consultation with me, when I do give legal advice, they decide who gets what, with what rules, when, all the things that go into a trust. The beneficiary is the person who benefits from the rules that the grantor sets. So there's two kinds of beneficiaries, however. This is something that's, again, technical but important to understand. There's a lifetime beneficiary and what's typically called a residual beneficiary. Lifetime beneficiaries get to benefit from the trust while the grantor is alive, where residual beneficiaries are the beneficiaries you think of when you think of who are my beneficiaries. It's the people who benefit from the trust after the grantor passes. Trustee, who manages the rules? That's an important person. This is the person you trust to manage your rule book if you're incapacitated or after you're gone, or maybe in some cases, even while you're alive and healthy. Then you have revocable versus irrevocable. The difference is obvious, this prefix, but revocable can be changed, irrevocable cannot be changed. However, there usually, in an irrevocable trust, are a few safety valves that if something goes completely haywire, you can kind of pull before the boiler blows up, so to speak. You always want to go into an irrevocable trust assuming that you can't change it. Because you don't want to. It usually creates a big mess. So that's the big difference. Revocable can be changed, irrevocable cannot be changed, revocable, much more common, and that's what we're gonna get into now. Okay, so let's get into trusts. Talk about what they are, what they aren't, what trusts do and don't do, the vast world. It's a whole wide universe of trusts. And for that reason, I want to start with that ice cream example. Ice cream, there's so many flavors. Some people like vanilla, some people like pistachio, some people like whatever, right? Trusts are the same way. There's so many different trusts out there, but just like flavors of ice cream, there are some are more popular and more common than others. Essentially, you have two bases of flavors. Hang in there with me. You have two bases of flavors, vanilla and chocolate. And trusts are the same way. You have two base flavors, revocable and irrevocable. Now, like ice cream, where vanilla is more popular as a base than chocolate, revocable is more popular than irrevocable as a base for trusts. That doesn't mean some people don't use irrevocable trusts. People do, just like they eat chocolate ice cream. If you know somebody who has a trust, you'd probably want to guess they have a revocable living trust. Just like if somebody told you, I'm going out for ice cream, and guess what the base flavor is going to be, you'd want to guess vanilla. So that's where I want to start, is this difference between chocolate and vanilla, between irrevocable and revocable trusts. So let's start with vanilla. Revocable living trust. And vanilla is actually a good description of it. Vanilla kind of means plain, bland, usual. Again, revocable living trusts are the most common trusts. If somebody's just doing the traditional revocable living trust, it is pretty plain. The things you can play with though, just like you can add cookies and cream or chocolate chips or sprinkles or brownies or whatever else to vanilla ice cream to make it a little different, you can do the same thing with revocable trusts. You can add in successor trustee language for who takes over as the manager of the trust, remember, when you're no longer able to manage it on your own. And maybe you have different conditions. Maybe you have, if so-and-so is this age, they're taking over, but if not, then this person. Or certainly if this person is not alive anymore, then you have the next person. Right, so there's a little flavors you can add in. Maybe you can add in a flavor of, I don't want a check just to be cut after I'm gone to my son and my daughter. I want there to be restrictions on their inheritance. That would be another little zest you could add to your vanilla ice cream. to make it different than just the bland, plain old thing, specific to what you like and what you want. This all stays within the revocable living trust base, but it can be tailored specifically to you without straying from the revocability, the ability to change it if you want to swap out your toppings. You're also probably going to be the beneficiary while you're alive, with your loved ones as beneficiaries after you're gone. That's the revocable living trust. You're kind of the judge, the jury, and executioner for a revocable living trust. Now I want to get into irrevocable trust, the chocolate. The two typical uses for irrevocable trusts are for asset protection and tax efficiency. So I'm going to break those down here in a bit. In a lot of irrevocable trusts, the trust maker, the person who comes up with the rules, you, if you're the client, are no longer the beneficiary of that trust even while you're alive. You remove yourself from having a beneficial interest in the assets of the trust so that creditors, for example, can't come and attach it and say, hey, you can get to that, why don't you get to it and then pay us? So that requires giving up some direct control. There's actually a quote by John D. Rockefeller that I rely on to describe this. He has a quote that says, own nothing, control everything. And that comes off as kind of a cynical, robber baron type of quote. But essentially it summarizes how you achieve asset protection with trusts or corporate interests, is that you give up ownership, the beneficial interest, but you maintain the control through the trust document you put together. Speaking of control, irrevocable trusts are often, but not always, see somebody else being the trustee of the trust as well. You're not managing it, you're not getting a benefit from it, directly at least, while you're alive. So you do this in order to separate yourself from creditors, like I mentioned, or to make whatever's in that trust not count towards your estate for estate tax, income tax, other tax purposes after you're gone. That's what you use irrevocable trust for. Asset protection from creditors, nursing home costs, or estate tax reduction mostly for the people who have that kind of money. Finally, there's a question that goes, what goes into a trust anyway? Well, the answer is easiest by saying what doesn't go into them. Your IRAs, your 401ks do not go into the trust. You don't retitle those from yourself as owner to your trust as owner. You may add your trust as a beneficiary. Technically, that's not an ownership by the trust. Assets that are typically owned by a trust are going to be real estate, your home, maybe post-tax investment accounts that aren't IRAs, aren't Roth, maybe CDs, money markets. Those types of things are the most commonly owned things by trust. Business interests, LLC membership, S-Corp shares can be owned by trusts. And the wisdom or lack of wisdom behind that depends on circumstance and facts. So you fund the trust by retitling things into the name of the trust, maybe with you as trustee of it. You update your retirement accounts, maybe with the trust's beneficiaries, or just make sure the beneficiaries are whoever you want them to be. And then you have what's called a funded estate plan, and now you're really cooking. So that is funded trust. That's how you fund an estate plan. The last thing before we stop is I want to talk about the purpose of trusts. As I mentioned at the very beginning, trusts are not just for the super wealthy. The most common kind of trust, the most plain vanilla revocable living trust, is a tool that's meant to avoid probate. So if you have a home, for example, and you're the second spouse to pass away, there's nobody else on that deed other than you that's alive, that house is probably going to put you into probate. And to avoid that, you can simply deed your house to yourself as trustee of a revocable living trust. And now probate will be off the radar. So I want to thank you for watching this video, taking the time out of your day to support the channel. If you feel like this has earned it, please give us a like, a subscribe. That would really help us build this channel out. If you want more information on things like this, I am launching in July an Estate Planning 101 course. You can use the promo code EP25 to get 25% off through the end of March. So I'm really excited to give you more information with that class, and it could be the right place to get more information about what you need in your estate plan. Thank you again. Be kind to each other.